we might be told that we need to aim for, say, 1,500 calories a day or something, but you could get that from a load of Mars bars. You know, it's very, very different to getting that from whole foods. And if we're eating in a way where we're not meeting our nutritional requirements, we're not nourishing our bodies.
All right, let's jump in. I'm here with Louise, and we are talking all about women's health. I'm going to say, just like keep it general and say we're talking about women's health over 40 because this is an important topic. Because as we know, things start to shift and change when we get, I mean, really and truly, let's be honest, just as we age in general, but especially I feel like the 40 mark is kind of a big one for women. And we start to hear like, oh, everything changed, when I turned 40. So I'm excited to jump into this with you, Louise. So thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I'm excited to jump into it too.
Yes. So let's just start with I personally love hearing everybody who does any sort of nutrition, health, wellness. We all have our own story. So I'd love to hear just kind of the backstory on how you got to be in this area.
Well, for me, my interest in nutrition really came from my mum. As I grew up, she was always so interested in nutrition and always talking about, how it's not all about low fat and you shouldn't be eating all these like diet foods and stuff. She
She
was
was
like
ahead of her
really,
time.
definitely, yeah, she was really ahead of her time. And so that really gave me the nutrition bug. So I studied it. And then when I went into practicing nutrition, I worked with everyone and anyone who had any sorts of issues, whether it was depression or IBS or skin problems, you name it. But what I kind of noticed was that everyone that came to see me, whatever they came to see me for, they also wanted to lose weight.
Hmm.
And what was interesting was the people that came to me just for weight loss and not for any of these other things actually didn't get as good a results as the people who were more health focused, the people who were focused on like healing their guts and balancing their
Hmm.
hormones. So that really sparked that interest for me in why is it that, weight loss isn't as simple as they say. It's not as
Yeah.
simple as just cutting your calories and doing more
Hmm.
exercise. And also, particularly for women over 40, maybe even as early as 35, late
Yep.
30s, something shifts in the body and suddenly the diets that used to work when you're in your 20s just don't work anymore. And that kind of midlife stage, I see so many women who are putting in a lot of effort to try and lose weight or just maintain a healthy weight and not seeing a lot of results. So that's kind of why I end up going into that area, because it's just seems to be such a problem area where there's just a real lack of support. Most women are told, oh, it's your hormones or
Hmm.
it's menopause, it's your age, and they don't really get given any real support. So I really wanted to do something about that.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a huge one. I was literally just having this conversation a couple days ago about this where it's like women go, I mean, and this isn't even just about the weight loss thing, but it's always like, oh, it's your hormones or you're getting older. Like that's their answer for everything. Where it's like, why do I have to take that as the answer? Like, why does that have to be the answer? I don't want to just accept it's because I'm getting older. So
Mm.
I agree with you. I feel like this is a huge gap in just women's health in general and support for women's health. And that, I mean, basically, and I mean, I'm pretty sure this is like universal thing and isn't just like a US thing, but like doctors are just kind of like, oh, it is what it is. You just kind of learn to live with it as you get older. Like, I hate that.
Mm. Yeah. And I think it's kind of like at the extremes, because up until recently, it's not really been spoken about at all. And then it kind of got started to be treated like it was a disease,
Yes.
menopause and aging.
Right. Totally.
And but at both extremes, there was nothing being done. Like no one
Hmm.
was actually getting any help. And it's probably the same where you are, over here in the UK, it's been talked about a hell of a lot more. There's always documentaries and things,
Hmm.
and like incentives that companies are putting out and that sort of thing. And it's been talking about more in government. But again, it's still not really doing anything
Right.
for the
Right.
women who are struggling,
Exactly.
with understanding a bit more about HRT, and there's more conversations happening, but not a lot's actually changing.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. Because and it is like that here too. I do feel like people are talking about it more, but then it's still we're just talking about it. Like nobody's doing
Mhm.
anything about it. It's still not a whole lot of solutions. So when we're talking about, well, let's start here. We're talking about weight loss, specifically weight loss, and we're talking about women over 40. And this is a loaded question, so you can answer it however you want to. But why is it harder for women over 40 to lose weight?
Yeah, so there's quite a few reasons, and some of it is like circumstantial. Some of it is to do with the way that your life changes as you go into that mid stage of life. Oftentimes you might have kids and you might have a lot just more going on, busier.
Right.
Perhaps you've got parents that you're having to support and do more for, still working full time. And so you probably have less time to focus on your food and be active. So we typically get more sedentary. So some of it can be circumstantial, but there's also changes that are happening in the body naturally as well. After the age of 35, if we aren't taking steps to maintain our muscle mass, then we're going to be losing it. And
Mhm.
we lose it kind of faster and faster as time goes on. Um, and that's really key because your muscle is metabolically active. So the less muscle you have, the less calories you're burning at rest. And so basically the slower your metabolism is, you're going to find it harder to keep the weight off or to lose weight. Um, so that's a big shift that happens. And then really at the same time for women, your hormones are starting to shift as well. We might think of menopause as being something that happens when we're close to 50, but actually that shift in hormones can start happening around the age of 35 into 40s. And it's a very gradual transition, but your body starts producing less estrogen and progesterone, and that has an impact on the way that we burn and store fats. It impacts our insulin management. And so it makes it more likely that we're going to put on a little bit of weight, particularly around the middle as well. A lot of women find that they may have carried weight on their arms and their legs and their hips before, but it starts to go more around their tummy, which is always such a big frustration.
Mhm.
And the thing is that that shift doesn't happen because you're overeating or because you're not doing enough exercise. It happens because of the way that your hormones are shifting. And it's exacerbated by things like stress and gut imbalances and lack of sleep and all these things. So, dieting doesn't address that stubborn weight around the middle. And that's why it's so frustrating for so many women who are working harder than ever to get the weight off and not seeing any results.
Yes, yes, and like you said a second ago, it's not it's crazy to me that we still see this because I mean, I literally just saw a thing my husband sent me on Instagram yesterday where people are still saying calories in, calories out. Like, it's clearly not as simple as calories in, calories out, or we would all be, whatever, however we wanted to look. And it's crazy to me that we're still perpetuating that story. Like, it is as simple as calories in, calories out, like
Mm.
you said, because I see the same thing with a lot of clients I work with. It's like they're literally doing everything and the weight isn't budging. So when you're talking about kind of the shift in the hormones, but is it just about the hormones? Like, are we blaming all of it on the hormones? Like, what other things are coming into play there?
Yeah, the hormones have become a little bit of a scapegoat, and the hormones are kind of still more of a symptom. They're not necessarily the root of the issue.
Agreed.
And lots of things that are going on in your body impact your hormones. So we do have a natural decline in our hormones as we get into our late 30s, 40s, 50s. Um, but that, as I say, is natural. And there are plenty of women who go through that process without struggling with their weight.
Mhm.
So it's not that transition that is the problem. It's all the other stuff that exaggerates that decline in your hormones and causes other imbalances as well. And also exaggerates the decline in muscle mass. So the things that I'm talking about are things like your gut health. If you have imbalances in your gut in terms of not enough beneficial bacteria, maybe an overgrowth of not so beneficial bacteria, inflammation, not absorbing very well, then that's something that actually really impacts your hormones. And we don't tend to think about our guts when we think about our hormones, but the gut is where we absorb our nutrients, and it's where we eliminate our waste. And if your gut isn't working very well, then you're not going to be absorbing the nutrients you need to make your hormones in a balanced way. And you're also potentially going to be not eliminating your hormones properly and actually reabsorbing some of
Mhm.
the ones that should have been eliminated. And then there's how your gut can cause inflammation in the body, and that can be very disruptive to your hormones. So, yeah, the gut is a really big factor. Um, and then there's things like your liver function. Our liver needs to detox and remove our hormones from our body once we've used them. And we again tend to think about your liver as, if we have a blood test and it says it's normal, then we think, oh, good, my liver's healthy.
Mhm.
And, that is great. Your liver's healthy. But just because it's healthy doesn't mean it's necessarily functioning as optimally as it could
Exactly.
be.
Mhm.
And you may not be detoxing your hormones or other toxins that you've been exposed to very efficiently. And that can be very disruptive to your hormones as well. Um, and, both the gut and the liver, I'm talking specifically about how they interfere with your hormones, but they also, in other ways, can interfere with the way that you burn fat. So it's a kind of interconnected thing. There's usually lots of things going on, and it's usually not just your hormones that are the issue.
Right, right, right. So when you're helping women with this and, you know, well, actually, let me ask you this first. I just love to, this is just like, I'd love to know how you have this conversation with women because I find that having the conversation with women, because a lot of women, and I give your mom props because again, like I said, your mom was ahead of her
Mm.
time where she was trying to be like, don't eat the diet foods when like that's all we had growing up. It was like every diet under the sun, every like it was just diet culture was real. So when we're getting women out of this mindset of like the dieting mindset, because most a lot, I don't want to say most women, and maybe not categorize it that way, but a lot of women, that's where they are. It's like they're just like
Mhm.
looking like what's the diet that's going to fix it. So how are
Mm.
you having a conversation with those women that to get them out of that mindset where it's where you're trying to tell them like it's not just the diet. Like it may not
Mm.
even be your diet at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I think with diet culture, as we've said, it's always been about calories and how much food you're eating. And the problem with that is that it completely ignores the quality of the food that you're eating. And so you can be in a calorie deficit, but you may not be getting any nutrients. You
Mhm.
can we might be told that we need to aim for, say, 1,500 calories a day or something, but you could get that from a load of Mars bars.
Yeah.
It's very, very different to getting that from whole foods. And if we're eating in a way where we're not meeting our nutritional requirements, we're not nourishing our bodies, then it's going to be very difficult to sustain that way of eating because you're going to be absolutely starving,
Mhm.
not just because of lack of calories, but because your body's missing out on essential nutrients. And your body's really good at telling you when it is lacking essential nutrition, and it will give you cravings and it will make you eat and eat and eat until it gets it. So unfortunately, we tend to mistake those cravings, and we tend to eat the wrong things, the things that our body isn't actually lacking. Um, but actually, if we base our diets on more whole foods and foods that are really nutrient dense, rather than worrying about how many calories are in them, then it's much, much easier to meet our nutritional needs. And your body gets a lot better at regulating your appetite. So that's the type of conversation that I try to have with my clients to really shift away from thinking about how much they're eating and instead
Mhm.
think about what does my body need to thrive, or what does my body need to be in balance. And when we can start looking at it from that angle, as I say, our bodies regulate themselves better, and it's much, much easier to be in control of what we're eating, and you feel a lot better as well.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. What are some things that women can do as they get closer to 40 or kind of past the 40 mark? What are some things we can do to kind of don't know if offset is the right word, but maybe it is offset, like potentially the weight that we might gain as our hormones start to shift and stuff? What are some things that women can do?
I think one of the first things that I would think about is taking steps to maintain muscle mass or build muscle mass. And many of the women that I've worked with who have been desperately trying to shift weight are absolutely going at it with the cardio. And cardio is great. Obviously, it's really good for your heart health and circulation and all those things. But it's not so great for sustaining muscle mass. And actually, if we switch some of that out for more strength training, then you're going to be maintaining your muscle and building some muscle, which is really going to set you up well for when you're going through that mid stage of life. Um, and alongside trying to building some strength training, we want to make sure that we're actually eating enough to be able to build muscle. If you're in a calorie deficit, you're going to find it very difficult to build muscle, particularly if you're not getting enough protein. So I would say starting to become aware of how much protein you're eating and ensuring that you're getting at least some protein with every meal and that you're doing some strength training is a really good place to start. And then alongside that, I'd also start building in some habits that help to alleviate stress or manage stress. Because even if you're not stressed right now, um, it helps to have those habits in place before you're having to go through a very stressful phase. And if you can become good at managing stress now, then that is going to give you such an easier transition because you're going to be more resilient to stress and your hormones are going to thank you for it. So yeah, I would say those are probably the key things. Build muscle, make sure you're eating enough, particularly protein, and start focusing on managing stress properly.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. And I think, like you said, I think this stress one is like such a boring answer for people. Like, that's not what they want to hear because it sounds so, and
No.
it sounds so like, it sounds so insulting to people too. It's like manage stress, like, because people like we live in a stressful world. But I
Yeah.
think, like you said, it's also like building those practices or strategies or whatever it is, so you have those before, like, so you're not waiting until you're hit with stress to be trying to manage it or deal with it. I feel like that's a big one of the biggest problems with how people manage it, because you were saying the resilience. Like, we want to have these practices to build resiliency in our nervous systems and in our bodies. And I feel like that's the piece that's missing. And then we wait till the stressful thing happens, and then our bodies are like, "Oh, we don't know how to handle it."
Yeah, definitely. And I think when you do wait until you're in that stressful situation, the last thing you want to do is go and meditate or
Right.
go
Do
and
your breath
like
work.
have a massage or like you might
Yeah.
want to do that, but you don't
Right.
feel like you've got the capacity to be able to
Yes.
stop to do it. You're
Yes.
you're absolutely wired and in fight or flight mode. But if we can build in habits, then these things come more naturally to us when we need them the most. And it doesn't have to be anything dramatic, taking a couple of minutes each day just to stop and do some deep belly breathing is a wonderful habit to build in. And particularly because you can do it anywhere. You could
Mhm.
be sitting in traffic and doing it, or you can do it just before you go to bed or before you eat or anything like that. Um, and so yeah, simple habits are really powerful. There's a lot of research about things like cold showers and cold water exposure and how that helps to stimulate your vagus nerve and put you into that rest and digest mode, taking you out of that fight or flight mode. And that can be in many forms. It could be in the form of cold water swimming, or it could be as simple as splashing your face with cold water
Mhm.
in the mornings and
Mhm.
anywhere in between that. So you can often adapt these habits to fit with what's going to work for you.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think that's the big key there is to find the thing that works for you, and also isn't like, because I find a lot of times women especially, I'm calling out women because it's usually women especially, but I think with anything, but with, like, we were talking about mindfulness practice and stress management, and then they're like stressing about the stress management practices. So then it's like, they're stressing about fitting all this stuff into the routine and trying to fit. So then it's like, well, this is like this is counterproductive because now we're stressing about stressing, and it's just kind of
Mm.
this snowball effect of trying to fit all the things in. But I think, like you said, it's finding the things that work for you and that, are easier for you to implement, and it's not another stressor.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I think on a similar theme, kind of going back to what we're talking about in terms of talking about mindset around weight loss, something that a lot of women stress about is the scales.
Mm,
And I I see it so often where someone is obsessing over the scales, they're weighing themselves
totally.
every day, and it's totally normal to go up and down a little bit each day. But if you're fixating on that, it's such a source of stress. And so often I've managed to convince someone to stop weighing themselves, at least, cut it down to once a week, maybe even once a
Right.
month. And
Right.
when they've done that, they've started seeing better progress because they're not in this vicious cycle of, oh my God, I've tried so hard and I've gained half a pound. This isn't working. And then falling off the wagon. And it's just a lot easier to be consistent when you're not fixating, and you just get
Yes,
better results when you're consistent. So
absolutely.
yeah, that's I think a big part of that mindset. Um, I think for any age, but I think particularly when weight loss gets that little bit trickier,
Mhm.
we don't want to be obsessing on the scales at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, and I'm glad you brought that up too, because I find the same, that is a huge source of stress for women, and especially, I'm trying to say this in a very diplomatic way, but especially like older generations who were like, you know, perhaps middle age in the thick of diet culture. It's like that the all that matters is the calories, the number on the scale, right? All that. And like you, I mean, you made all the points that I would have made. Like, it's not just about the quantity of the calories, it's the quality, right? It's not about the number on the scale. Well, and two, like, and I have a Pilates and fitness studio, and we talk about all the time, like it's more, if you want to look at numbers, it's more about your body composition than the scale, right? Which, I think
Mm,
we all like know this on like a basic level, but like really feeling that in like how it makes sense in the body, because weight and, like we're talking about muscle mass here, and muscle mass as you age, like that's what you want to keep on. And that's what I tell my clients too. If you want to look at anything, go keep track of your muscle mass. Like, I don't care what
mm.
your number on the scale is, but like let's look at your muscle mass and the fat mass, right? And compare those kind of things rather than just the number on the scale.
Yeah, definitely. It's a much more helpful thing to monitor. And, we want to make sure we're maintaining or building muscle.
Right.
So if you're looking at the scales and wondering why they're not going down, maybe it's not that you're not losing fat. Maybe it's that you're actually making progress in the right direction
Exactly.
with your muscle, for sure.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And that's a huge, I feel like that's a huge like mindset shift for people too, because sometimes the skill might go the opposite direction that you wanted to, but like you said,
Mm-hmm.
it could be, the skill could be going up, but you're actually losing body fat and gaining muscle mass. So it's like, I think we need to have a more realistic perspective on like what the number on the scale really means, which, in all honesty, in my opinion at least, it really doesn't mean a whole lot.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I can't tell you often I've had clients who have seen like their waist measurements going down,
Hmm.
but the scales have been not moving or going up. And they're like, oh, I'm not seeing results. And it's like, well, you
Yes,
are,
you
like,
are. Yeah.
your waist is shrinking. And isn't that what
Yes.
we all want? I
Yes.
think we have to be, as an individual trying to lose weight or get healthier, I think we have to be really intentional and mindful about how we're using the scales, and just how we're approaching the whole thing, because like you say, we know this stuff, most people know this stuff, but it's so easy to just stick with what we know in
Mhm.
terms of what we've done before. And actually, if we are quite intentional about not using the scales in that way, then it's almost need to be something that you set out with from the start to say, look,
Mhm.
this is how I'm going to
Right.
approach this.
Right. Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Mm.
So I have a couple more questions I want to ask you, but before we kind of start to wrap it up, do you have any other important things you feel like every woman over the age of 40 needs to know this or do this, like anything that we've left out that you feel is like really helpful for women as we age?
I think the only other thing that I'd want to add is that something that I see with a lot of women is that they go to their doctors because they don't feel right because they're not losing weight. The doctors run some basic tests and say everything's normal. So, you just got to live with it, or it's just your age. But what I would say is don't accept that. If you don't feel right, then you know that something isn't right. And it may not be that there's something wrong, but it might be that, you're not optimal in terms of how your gut's working or your hormones are balanced or whatever. So, depending on what's available to you, you could get a second opinion, you could push for more advanced testing, or it might be that go private and you get some other tests done through a functional practitioner, or over here in the UK, there's more and more tests that you can get online yourself.
Mhm.
It's probably the same in the US as well. So I think just advocating for yourself and not accepting, if you feel that something's not right, don't just feel that you have to live with it.
100%. This is advice that the listeners get all the time because I tell them the same thing. If you feel like
Right.
something is off, then it is. Like if you
Mhm.
feel it, your body's trying to tell you something. So yeah, 100%. I agree with you so much. And yeah, it's a real thing. The medical gaslighting with women is like a real thing. And so I mean, I think women, there's no more valuable advice at this point of where we are in the world for women than like, yeah, if you feel like something off, then it is. So yeah, I totally agree with you. So I do have another question I want to ask you that I like to ask everyone as you wrap up. But before I do that, can you let everybody know where they can find you and follow you, get more information, everything that you do, if they need support with their health, with their weight as they're aging?
Sure. So you can connect with me on Instagram and Facebook and just search for at Louise Digby Nutrition, or my website is louisedigbynutrition.com. And then I also have a podcast as well, which is called The Thriving Metabolism, which you can find on any podcast platform.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing that. Of course, I'll have links all that in the show notes so y'all can go check it out. And the last question I want to ask you that I like to ask everybody, what do you think is the most important thing you can do to live with purpose?
Oh, that's such a good question. Um, I think based on a lot of the conversations that I'm having with other practitioners recently, I think that trying to tune into your emotions and listen to what your body and your mind is trying to tell you is is so important. And I think we all try and self-soothe, and we try and suppress our feelings and emotions with food or alcohol, or it could be with scrolling on Instagram or things like that. And rather than actually living in the moment and experiencing and processing what we're feeling. um and I think, whether you're trying to lose weight or whether you're trying to run a successful business or whatever it might be, I think starting with the mindset stuff and just tuning into what you're actually feeling and thinking and trying to process that, whether that's journaling or talking it out or whatever, is extremely powerful.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I mean, everything you're saying, you're speaking my language. I talk about this up on the podcast all the time, but I mean, it really does. I mean, I think, our overall well-being is all about, it's all about that part. It's that emotional, mental part of the body. Like it all starts there. So yeah, I totally agree. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for bringing your insight here and sharing with us, all of us aging women, so helping us out as we age. So thank you so much for being here and for sharing all of your wisdom with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really lovely chatting with you.